Chapter 11. A Knife Trick. Amanda gasped. You're kidding, right? He shook his head, an odd smile forming on his excited face. But Dave, I can't kill her, Amanda protested shrilly. No, not kill her, Dave replied breathlessly. That's dumb. My plan is much better than that. What plan? Amanda demanded, staring at the gleaming knife blade. Plan it in her room, in a dresser or drawer or something, then make sure your parents find it. When they see that Chrissy is hiding a knife like this, they'll bounce her out of there in a second. Amanda let her breath out in a relieved whoosh. Dave handed Amanda the knife. She took it reluctantly. She felt a cold chill on the back of her neck as she spotted 7 notches cut into the ivory handle. Do you think these notches show how many animals were skinned with this knife? Could be, Dave replied. They probably skinned them right in here. That explains the blood all over the place. For a minute there, I thought you were totally nuts, Amanda confessed. That's all right, he replied, grinning. My brothers and I have done some nutty stuff, but I don't think we're actively insane. They both laughed. But I really think my idea about Chrissy might work, he insisted. Amanda glanced at the knife in her hand. It's a little out there, extreme, don't you think? I think Chrissy sounds a little out there, Dave replied, and I think you should do whatever it takes to get rid of her. He ripped open a white box and pulled out a cellophane bag. Want some dried apples? He offered, holding open the bag. This place is completely stocked with dried foods. Dehydrated hamburgers, powdered milk, everything. Mike and I used to make up these weird adventure fantasies, like aliens had invaded the planet and we had to hide out here. Dave grinned at her. I shouldn't be telling you all my weird secrets. Just a minute ago you thought I was nuts. Those kinds of fantasies are fun. I don't think that's nuts, Amanda assured him. Good, Dave replied. Mike and I spent hours making up wild stories about the shed. It sounds crazy, but I guess you never know what could happen. That's for sure, said Amanda, her thoughts returning to Chrissy. Don't worry, Dave told her. It'll all work out. Amanda gazed up into his soft, sympathetic eyes. The next thing she knew, they were kissing, slowly, tenderly. Dave stroked her hair. Don't worry, you're not in this alone, he whispered. I'll help you. Like with algebra? Amanda asked. Yeah, like that, he replied, smiling. Neither of us knows what's going on, but we'll get through it. Amanda smiled. For the first time in days, the cold hand of fear released its grip a little. At last, she had a friend. I'd better get back, Amanda said. My parents will be wondering where I am. Are you going to take the knife? Dave asked. Amanda stared at it lying on the low wooden table. Would Dave's plan work? Would the knife be enough to get Chrissy out of the house for good? Impulsively, she grabbed it. Okay, she said, staring hard at the gleaming long blade. Okay, I'll do it. Amanda felt carefree as they drove home. Riding in the car with Dave was like being in a safe, happy place. They laughed and sang along with the radio all the way back. But as the car pulled up the drive, Amanda's good mood disappeared. Home again, she thought glumly. Home with Chrissy and the family who adores her, my family. Dave took Amanda's hand as they walked to the front door. Amanda pushed open the door. Chrissy stood in the living room looking fantastic in white short shorts and a heather gray midriff top. Hi, Chrissy greeted them pleasantly. Amanda didn't like the way Chrissy's blue eyes widened appreciatively at the sight of Dave. Chrissy tossed her silky hair over her shoulder. Amanda, you didn't tell me you had such a good-looking friend, she said. He's from Sea Haven, Amanda said pointedly. I thought all you Sea Haven people knew one another. I'm not from Sea Haven, Chrissy said flatly. Your address is 3 Old Sea Road, Amanda insisted. Oh, Aunt Lorraine is buying that old house, but we're not moved into it yet. I put that on my resume because I thought we'd be in it by now, but you know how those things go. Where do you live? Dave asked pleasantly. My aunt and I live in Seaport, Chrissy told him. That's the town next to Sea Haven. Dave told Amanda. Are you sure you don't mean Harrison County? Amanda asked, referring to the clipping from the Harrison County Gazette. The flirtatious smile Chrissy aimed at Dave didn't slip for a moment. Amanda felt disappointed to see Chrissy so unruffled by the reference to Harrison County. No, not Harrison County, said Chrissy. Seaport. She turned her attention to Dave. I heard a car pull up. What do you drive? A 78 Mustang, Dave told her. That's a classic, Chrissy exclaimed, moving closer to Dave. Would you show it to me? With a darting glance at her bag, Dave reminded Amanda of the knife. Amanda realized he was right. If he could get Chrissy outside, she could go plant the knife. Are you interested in old cars? Dave asked Chrissy. Totally, Chrissy replied. Come on, I'll show it to you. Amanda glared at the back of Chrissy's head as she followed Dave out the door. The moment the door shut behind them, she hurried up to Chrissy's room. Not wasting a moment, she darted across the room and pulled open the top dresser drawer. Chrissy's silk white underthings were neatly folded inside. With a trembling hand, Amanda took the knife from her bag. The blade shimmered in the sunlight. Amanda felt cold all over. She realized she hated holding it. Without warning, something strange happened to the knife. A bead of red slowly formed on its tip. Amanda studied it curiously. What's happening? She wondered. She brought the knife up close, trying to see what was causing the stain. Then, as she gaped in startled horror, a bright red spray shot out of the knife blade. Blood, Amanda realized. It's spraying blood all over me. Chapter 12. Ruffled Feathers. With a terrified cry, Amanda hurled the knife at the dresser. Spewing bright red blood, it hit the dresser top and tumbled into the open drawer. Amanda stared helplessly, frozen by her shock, watching as Chrissy's things were drenched in red. This isn't happening, she cried out loud, her voice tiny and choked. This can't be happening. Before she realized that she was running down the stairs to the living room, the empty living room. Where were her parents? Why weren't they there to help her? Oh! A low gasp of horror escaped Amanda's throat as she saw the birdcage. She took a step closer, one more, then stopped. No! Her frantic wail revealed her shock. Salt and Pepper lay dead in their cages. Their throats! Amanda murmured, wrapping a cold hand around her own throat. Their throats are cut! In answer to Amanda's shrieks, Mrs. Conklin came racing in from the deck. Amanda, what on earth? She cried breathlessly. You're covered in blood. Amanda pointed, one hand still around her throat as if protecting it. Oh, excuse me. Her mother gasped. Oh, no. Neither of them moved. A heavy silence fell over the room. Dimly, Amanda became aware of the front door opening and closing. Someone had come into the house and hurried upstairs, but Amanda couldn't even wonder who it was. She felt numb all over, too terrified to feel anything. Mrs. Conklin spoke first. Amanda, I don't understand this. How could you? Amanda stared blankly at her mother. What was she talking about? Chrissy burst into the room. She held the bloody knife high in her hand. The blade was stained with red blood. Mrs. Conklin, Chrissy cried breathlessly. I found this in my top drawer. There's blood all over everything. All my stuff is ruined. All ruined. She stopped short at the sight of Amanda's blood-drenched clothing. Her eyes traveled over the dead birds. Oh, no, Chrissy cried, raising her hands to the sides of her face. The birds, they're... She narrowed her eyes at Amanda. The blood in my drawer, it's from them? Don't act innocent, Amanda shrieked, balling her hands into tight fists. Don't pretend, Chris, you did this. You. I don't know how, but it was you. Chrissy gasped and covered her mouth with one hand, her eyes widened in confusion. How can you say that, Amanda? How can you say such horrible things about me? Why do you hate me so much? Once again, Amanda felt herself slip out of control, but she couldn't stop herself. You're evil, she screamed at Chrissy. You're evil, and I want you out of my house. I want you out now. Amanda's father burst into the room. Calm down, Amanda, he cried angrily. Take a deep breath. Don't say another word. He turned to Mrs. Conklin. Has she tried to hurt Chrissy again? No, Amanda wailed desperately. No, please, no, don't turn against me. Be on my side, please, be on my side. Amanda stared at them. These were her parents. They had to be on her side, didn't they? The birds have been killed, Mrs. Conklin told her husband softly. Chrissy found the knife in her dresser drawer. I can't take any more of this, Mr. Conklin said, sighing. If we have to find a doctor for Amanda, we have to find a doctor for Amanda right now. Chapter 13. Bad News. The next morning, Amanda sat in the office of Dr. Almont, a psychiatrist. Amanda guessed he was about 60. He had gray hair and dark, penetrating eyes. He didn't say much. He sat back in his large brown leather chair and folded his arms, nodding as Amanda spoke. Amanda had been reluctant to talk at first, but once she got started, it felt good to unload the whole story. Slowly, trying to remain calm, she told him everything that happened since Chrissy had arrived. When she finished, she waited for the doctor to reply. You've been through a lot, he said finally, shifting back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head. Then you believe me? Amanda asked, feeling her spirits lift. I believe that you believe what you are saying, he said. Amanda felt as if he had just slugged her in the chest. He didn't think she was a liar. He just thought she was nuts. Do you feel that when you failed algebra, you let your parents down, he asked. Tears pulled in Amanda's dark eyes. This isn't about algebra, not at all, she insisted. Let me suggest something and see how it hits you, said Dr. Almont. Maybe somewhere deep inside you think you don't deserve your parents' love any more since you failed algebra. Maybe you think Chrissy is taking your place and you hate her for that. One tear slid down Amanda's cheek as she let her head drop in despair. You've got it all wrong, she murmured. That's not true. Dr. Almont walked around his desk. He came up to Amanda and patted her shoulder. Don't cry. This will all work itself out. Let me talk to your parents in private a moment. Wiping the tears off her cheeks, Amanda made her way into the waiting room. Her parents glanced up from their chairs. They both looked pale and solemn. Dr. Almont wants to see you, Amanda mumbled. You don't look like you feel any better, her mother observed. I don't, Amanda answered curtly. Dr. Almont appeared at the door. We'll be right back, honey, said Mrs. Conklin. Amanda sat and waited, wondering what Dr. Almont was saying to them. Was he telling them to lock her up in an institution? She sighed and shook her head, trying to force back the tears. Time dragged on. Her parents seemed to be in there forever. Excuse me. Her parents seemed to be in there forever. When they finally emerged from the inner office, their expressions were grim. Dr. Almont stepped out behind them. So, Amanda, you are going to see me again in 5 days, he told her. If you need to speak to me before then, call. Take one of my cards from the receptionist's desk. Above all, try to relax on the beach and put all this out of your head. Amanda nodded numbly as she took a card from the front desk. She hoped her parents hadn't paid a lot of money for that advice. Relax and forget it. Thanks loads, Doc. What did he have to say about me? Amanda asked as they walked across the small parking lot to the car they'd rented while the station wagon was being repaired. He thinks that failing algebra puts you under a lot of stress, said her father. He thinks that failure brought up fears of rejection and that subconsciously you're afraid we want to replace you with Chrissy. That's what he said to me, but it's not true, Amanda told him. This is all going on below the level of your conscious mind, Amanda, said Mrs. Conklin. You can't control it. That's why Dr. Almont wants you to relax, to lessen the stress you feel. Amanda climbed into the back seat of the car and lay down. The night before, she hadn't been able to sleep. She shut her eyes. I could always sleep in the car when I was a kid, she thought. Maybe I could sleep now. A few minutes later, Amanda heard her mother whisper, Amanda, are you awake? Amanda didn't feel like answering. She really wanted to be left alone. She decided to let them think she was asleep. She's out, Mrs. Conklin whispered to her husband. John, don't you think we should fire Chrissy? We can't now, Mr. Conklin said quietly. You heard what Dr. Almont said. I know, said Mrs. Conklin with a sigh. If we fire Chrissy, we'll be supporting Amanda's false fears about her, and we don't want to do that, do we? We don't want to give Amanda the message that she is right, that Chrissy is a threat to her. What he said makes sense, whispered Mr. Conklin. If she thinks Chrissy is really a threat, that eventually someone else will come along whom she feels threatened by, and she'll start this crazy behavior all over again. I know, Mrs. Conklin said with an air of sad resignation. It's better to let Chrissy stay and have Amanda work through her feelings right now. So Chrissy stays, Mr. Conklin confirmed. Amanda's heart pounded as she listened from the back seat. Chrissy is evil, she wanted to shout. Why are you falling for all of Dr. Almont's mumbo-jumbo? Chrissy is evil. There's nothing more to be said. Amanda thought hard all the way home. What can I do? What can I do now? By the time they pulled up the gravel driveway, Amanda had an idea. She would let everyone think she accepted Dr. Almont's theory. It would get her parents off her back, and it would put Chrissy off guard. Pretending that she had been deeply asleep, Amanda yawned and stretched as she followed her parents into the house. They found Chrissy playing Monopoly on the floor with Kyle, while Mary watched Sesame Street on the TV. Chrissy looked lovely in a white cotton sundress, her hair pulled back with a pink satin ribbon. Amanda noticed with amusement that Chrissy seemed to wear white a lot. Because she's so pure, Amanda thought. Pure evil. How did it go? Chrissy asked sweetly. Pretty good, Amanda replied. Can I talk to you out on the deck, Chrissy? Sure, Chrissy agreed. Excuse me, Kyle. No problem, said Kyle. He gazed up at Amanda sadly. Poor Kyle, Amanda thought. He obviously thinks his sister has become a nutcase. Out on the deck, an ocean breeze blew softly. It was a perfect summer day. Listen, Chrissy, Amanda started. Dr. Almont says this is all in my head. He says I'm insecure about you or something, so I want to apologize, really. I'm sorry about the way I've been acting. Sorry about everything. Amanda let out a long breath. There. That was a first step in making things better, or pretending to, at least. I understand, Chrissy replied solemnly. I hope we can be friends. Just then, Amanda felt something soft brush against her ankle. A kitten! She cried out delightedly. A tiny calico had wandered up onto the deck. Amanda knelt and picked her up. Where did you come from, little lady? She said, recalling that all cats with calico markings are female. The kitten's purr was like a small motor running inside it. Abruptly, the purring stopped. The kitten bared her tiny fangs and hissed at Chrissy. You better put that thing down, Chrissy warned tensely. It might be diseased. You shouldn't touch stray animals. Look how crazy it's acting. Alarms went off in Amanda's head as she thought of Mr. Jinx. She stared sharply at Chrissy. Why did animals hate her? Amanda set the kitten down on the deck and watched it run away. Good. Let him go back to wherever he came from, said Chrissy. Her expression brightened. Do you want to come in and play Monopoly with us? No, thanks, Amanda replied. Maybe I'll just take a walk down the beach. All right. I'm glad we're making a fresh start, Amanda. Me too, Amanda agreed. Chrissy disappeared inside, and Amanda headed down toward the pool. As she reached the shed, she heard the kitten meowing. She saw it in the shadow of the shed wall as if it were hiding. What's wrong, girl? Amanda asked, stooping down. Are you lost? Did somebody dump you off in the woods? In reply, the kitten nuzzled Amanda's hand. Come on, Amanda said quietly as she scooped up the kitten. I'll sneak you into my room. I don't want to upset Chrissy now that she and I are supposed to be friends. Amanda carried the cat over to the pool. Wrapping the tiny thing in a beach towel, she carried her around to the front of the house. Chrissy and Kyle were concentrating on their Monopoly game. It was easy for Amanda to sneak the cat up to her room. Then she crept down to the pantry and pulled out an unopened bag of dried cat food that had been bought for Mr. Jinx. Back in her room, Amanda mashed the dried food with a pencil and set it out on a fashion magazine for the kitten to eat. While she watched her gobble down the food, Amanda stretched out on the bed. A knock at the door stirred Amanda. She sat up, confused. Gray light filtered in through the window. She realized she must have slept for most of the day. Amanda, are you awake? Phone for you, came her mother's voice through the door. Susie, Amanda guessed. Stay here and be quiet, she whispered to the kitten as she slipped out the door. The kitchen phone receiver had been set on the counter for her. Amanda picked it up eagerly. Hi, Susie? This isn't Susie, a familiar female voice said. It's me. Carter? Amanda cried, surprised. Carter Phillips was a friend of Susie's. Amanda knew Carter from Shady Side High, but they had never really been friends. What's up? Did you hear about Susie? Carter began, sounding strained. No? Hear what? No, of course not. How could you know? Carter replied, then her voice broke and she uttered a sob. It's bad, Amanda. It's real bad. Huh? What's bad, Carter? What do you mean? Chapter 14. Get out now. Susie is in the hospital, Carter said in a trembling voice. What? Amanda wasn't sure she heard correctly. What happened? She was in the library yesterday looking up something, Carter continued. It's so weird, Amanda. Suddenly she slumped over on the microfilm viewer, blood pouring from her mouth and nose. How horrible! Amanda cried, clutching the phone tightly. What was it? The doctors are totally puzzled. They haven't a clue. They're keeping Susie in the hospital for tests. Amanda felt a knot of dread in her stomach. Chrissy had done this. She was absolutely sure of it. Chrissy had been on the phone line the day before when Amanda had talked to Susie. Somehow Chrissy had used her powers on Susie. Amanda, are you there? Carter asked. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking about something. This is so terrible. I know. Today I went to get the things Susie had left behind at the library. Mrs. Banton asked me to. The librarian told me Susie was checking on microfilmed back issues of the Harrison County Gazette when it happened. Mrs. Banton has no idea why she was doing it. Susie isn't exactly the type to do research when she doesn't have to. How did you know to call me? Amanda asked, still thinking about Chrissy. Susie had your summer phone number written on a notebook, so I thought I'd call to see if you could tell me anything that might help. She wasn't taking any weird drugs or anything, was she? Huh? Susie? Of course not, Amanda replied in a quavering voice. She realized that her hand was shaking so violently that she couldn't even hold the phone in her ear properly. Do you know why she was checking those old newspapers? Carter asked. No idea. How could she possibly explain to Carter everything that had been happening? Carter, I have to go. Call me tomorrow and let me know how Susie is, okay? All right, Carter agreed. She can't have any visitors, but I'll call Mrs. Banton and check. Thanks, Amanda said as she hung up. She stared at the phone, trying to stop shaking, thinking hard. Now I know one thing for sure, she decided. I have to get into Chrissy's room and see the rest of those clippings. They have the answer to Chrissy's real identity and purpose. Mrs. Conklin came into the kitchen. Amanda, your pal is a ghost. What's wrong? Susie Banton's in the hospital, she told her mother. Mrs. Conklin's face filled with surprise. What happened? I'm not sure. The doctors aren't sure either. That was all she was going to say. If she told her mother what she suspected about Chrissy, her parents would rush her back to Dr. Elmott first thing in the morning. How did your talk go with Chrissy? Mrs. Conklin asked. Amanda's eyes shifted restlessly for a moment. What should she say about Christy? She stuck to her decision to act as if she had really made peace with Chrissy. It went great, Mom. What Dr. Elmott said really made sense to me. I'm going to get along with Chrissy from now on. Mrs. Conklin studied Amanda. I hope so, honey. Yeah, don't worry, Mom. Okay, if you say so. Listen, the bakers called and invited your dad and me. It's Chrissy's night off. Do you feel well enough to mind the kids? Amanda turned to see Chrissy appear in the doorway. I'll stay if you need me, she offered. No, that's okay. You can go out, Chrissy, Amanda told her, flashing her a warm smile. If Chrissy went out, Amanda realized it would be the perfect chance to search the clippings and phone the references on Chrissy's resume. Really, the kids are all ready for bed anyway. There's not much to do. I don't have anything planned, Chrissy replied. You've had a hard time, and I don't mind staying. You girls can work this out yourselves, Mrs. Conklin laughed. As long as one of you stays, we're going. I'll stay, Amanda said firmly. Then at least let me go tuck the kids in and say goodnight, said Chrissy. They get upset if I don't do that. Chrissy hurried off to tuck them in. Mrs. Conklin kissed Amanda on the forehead. I guess you two really are going to be friends. I'm so glad. Thanks for staying. No problem. A few minutes later, Mr. and Mrs. Conklin drove away. Amanda returned to her bedroom. She passed to the room Kyle and Mary were sharing. Chrissy sat on the bed reading The Cat in the Hat Comes Back to Mary. In her bedroom, Amanda found the copy of Chrissy's resume. You stay in here, she warned the calico kitten. If you want to stay alive, I've got to hide you from Chrissy. Amanda hurried back to the kitchen. As she passed, she heard Chrissy reading another book to Mary. Closing the door behind her, Amanda crossed the room to the kitchen phone. She punched in the second number listed, the one which no one had ever answered before. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. Amanda gave up on the 7th ring. So much for that, thought Amanda. She glanced at the kitchen door, then punched in the first number, the one which was always busy. This time someone picked up right away. Hello? Oh, hello, said Amanda, startled that someone had answered. I'm calling about Chrissy Minor. She gave this number as a reference. Amanda checked the name above the number, Elaine Harriman. She said to speak to Mrs. Harriman. Well, the girl on the other end hesitated. I'm just a neighbor. My mother and we came into the judge's house. We were wondering why we hadn't seen the Harrimans in so long. You won't believe what we just found. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to be sick. It's so... At that moment, Amanda heard a woman call. Who's on the phone, Rachel? It's someone calling about Chrissy. Hang up right now. Amanda heard the older woman command. No, please, Amanda begged. Don't hang up. I can't talk now, the girl said, lowering her voice. Did you say this is about a reference? Do you know where Chrissy is? Yes, she's right here. Chrissy is in your house? The girl gasped in horror. Oh, no, get out, now. Why? Asked Amanda. Why? The phone went dead. Chapter 15. A picture of surprise. Amanda stared at the silent phone in shock. She glanced up to see Chrissy standing in the doorway, her arms folded across her white dress. Is something wrong with the phone? Chrissy asked, a strange smile on her face. No, it's fine, Amanda replied, hanging up quickly. I was just trying to remember someone's phone number. Susie Banton's number? Chrissy asked. Amanda's heart fluttered. No. Was Chrissy about to admit what she had done to Susie? Chrissy crossed to the refrigerator. Your mother told me about your friend Susie. What a shame. Amanda waited for more, but Chrissy just stepped to the cabinet and took out a glass. Amanda hurried down the hall, her mind racing. The girl on the phone had said to get out. What had she found in the Harriman house? Whatever it was, she said it was sickening. What had Chrissy done? Horrifying pictures crowded Amanda's mind. She had to push them out. If she let her imagination run wild, she knew she'd totally panic. She slowed her pace when she got to the room Kyle and Mary shared. Everything okay in there? She called into the room. Yeah, but Chrissy said she was going to bring me a glass of milk. Where is she? Kyle called from his bed, where he flipped through a comic book. Mary slept peacefully. Okay, coming right up, Amanda said, turning back. Should she listen to that girl on the phone? Should she get the kids out of the house? Where would they go? Besides, her parents would bring them right back. Her parents would just think that Amanda had gone psycho again. No, Amanda decided, it would be better to get Chrissy out tonight. Then she could look for the clippings, show her parents whatever she found, and hope it was enough to make them see for themselves that Chrissy was evil. Amanda stopped at the kitchen door. It had been pulled shut. Why? She pulled it open a tiny bit and peeked in. Chrissy had a small packet in her hand. She was pouring some kind of brownish powder into the milk. Her heart pounding, Amanda leaned hard against the wall. What did that packet contain? Poison? I can't let Kyle drink that milk, she decided. Taking a deep breath, Amanda pushed open the kitchen door. She leaned against the counter and tried to sound casual. So, what have you decided to do on your big night off? I told you, no plans, Chrissy replied. Maybe I'll just stay in my room and write letters. That doesn't sound like fun, Amanda said, trying not to sound desperate. Why don't you go to a movie? That new scary beach movie, Blood Surfer, is playing in town. I hear it's so bad it's good. No thanks, Chrissy replied with a smile. I hate scary movies. She picked up the milk. Amanda wrapped her hand around the glass. Let me take it to Kyle, she offered. After all, it is your night off. Well, I guess so, Chrissy agreed. Sure, Amanda echoed darkly. You'd just love me to get blamed for killing my own brother, wouldn't you? After all, everyone thinks I'm totally nuts now, anyway. Thanks to you, Chrissy. I'll just clean up a little here, Chrissy said pleasantly. Amanda left with the milk, wondering what to do with it. If she didn't give it to Kyle, he'd start screaming that he didn't get his milk. Then Chrissy would just whip him up another poison milkshake. Amanda decided to stall until Chrissy went to her room and went out. Then she dumped the milk. As she stood thinking, the doorbell rang. Still holding the milk, she answered the door. It was Dave. Hi, he said, smiling. You weren't in class today, so I brought over the assignments. Were you sick or something? Quickly and quietly, she drew him inside. No, I'm not sick, but I'm glad you're here, she whispered. I'm pretty sure Chrissy has poisoned this milk. She wants me to take it to Kyle and... Whoa, he stopped her. She poisoned this milk? What happened with the knife? Amanda squeezed his arm. You won't believe it. It was the most horrible thing. Dave's hand swept past her, knocking the glass from her hands. It shattered loudly on the wood floor. Oh man, what a klutz! He cried. His darting glance caused Amanda to turn. Chrissy had just come out of the kitchen. It took Chrissy a moment to see what had happened. No problem, she said quickly. I'll just get a towel for that. Thanks, Amanda whispered as Chrissy disappeared into the kitchen. That was fast thinking. I'll tell you about the knife later. Do you think you can distract her while I check out something in her room? Show her your car again or something. The more time you can give me, the... Here we go, Chrissy sang out, returning. She stooped and mopped up the milk with a cloth. No harm done, she said, gazing up at Dave with wide eyes. Now I'd better get Kyle more milk. The only problem is, I think I used the last packet of chocolate. Do you think Kyle will drink it plain? Huh? Amanda gasped. Chocolate? The packet contained only chocolate? Am I getting totally paranoid? Amanda asked herself. Am I totally losing it? She saw Dave staring at her, his expression questioning. I'll get the milk, Amanda volunteered eagerly. So, Dave, how's it going? I love your tan, Chrissy said as Amanda made her way into the kitchen. Very subtle, Chrissy. Why don't you just throw yourself at him? Amanda thought angrily as she opened the refrigerator. Blood Surfer is playing in town, she heard Dave say. I asked Amanda to go, but she says she has to catch up on algebra. You wouldn't want to come, would you? That'd be great, Chrissy replied. I love scary movies, and I hear this one's so bad it's good. Tonight's my night off, too. Do you think Amanda will mind? No, why should she? I'll tell her we're going, Dave said. I guess Dave's taking Chrissy to the movies is the price I have to pay to get her out of the house, Amanda told herself as she poured the milk. It would be pretty dumb to get jealous. I'll go get my sweater up in my room, she heard Chrissy say. Amanda hurried out of the kitchen. Did you have to make a date with her? She whispered. This will give you at least 2 hours, Dave whispered back. Just be careful around her, Amanda warned. Yeah, sure, Dave teased. I won't let her give me any chocolate milk. Chrissy appeared on the stairs. Did Dave tell you, Amanda? We're going to go see that movie you recommended. It's okay, isn't it? Have a good time, Amanda replied flatly. As soon as she heard Dave's car pull away, Amanda hurried up the stairs. Here's your milk, she told Kyle, stepping into the kid's room. Oh, he's asleep. She took the book from Kyle's hand, then she pulled Mary's blanket over her and turned off their light. Back in the kitchen, she called the number of the girl who had hung up on her. Maybe she'll be more willing to talk now, Amanda hoped. But the phone rang and rang. No one picked up. The girl must have gone next door. Sighing, Amanda hung up. Now let's find those clippings, she murmured out loud. Feeling her heart start to race, Amanda hurried up to Chrissy's room. The blue carpet still contained dark bloodstains. When she opened the top dresser drawer, Amanda was relieved to see that Chrissy's bloody things had been removed. Still, maroon splotches stained the inside of the drawer. Amanda shuddered at the memory. No news clippings here, Amanda thought, closing the top drawer. She searched the dresser carefully, one drawer at a time, only clothing. No sign of the newspaper stories. Amanda opened the narrow closet. Standing tiptoe, she pulled down a stack of shoe boxes from the top shelf. She opened each box and found shoes. The last box contained a pair of leather boots. Amanda couldn't resist taking a look at them. Lifting one from the tissue paper in the box, she turned the boot over in her hand. At least Chrissy has good taste, she thought. As she returned the boot to the box, Amanda saw a corner of faded newspaper peeking out from beneath the tissue lining. Excitedly, Amanda lifted the tissue paper. Yes, she murmured softly, I found them. Amanda lifted the first clipping. She covered her mouth in complete surprise when she saw the photo next to the article. It was a photo of her own father. Chapter 16. Lilith. Struggling to hold her hand steady, Amanda read quickly through the newspaper article. Public Defender John Conklin of Shadyside will defend Arthur Lawrence against a charge of arson. Mr. Lawrence, a homeless man, had been living under the train trestle on the border of Peachton in Harrison County. Last Tuesday, Mr. Lawrence was seen running from the parking lot of a professional building complex on Juniper Street in Peachton. Soon after, flames were seen coming from the law offices of Miner and Henry, which were housed in the complex. Miner and Henry? The name Miner was some sort of connection, but Amanda still didn't see how it fit. She continued reading. Mr. Lawrence claimed to be rummaging through the garbage cans when he spotted the smoke. He told police officers he was running to get help. However, police found empty gasoline canisters at his campsite under the trestle, and so the homeless man was arrested and charged with starting the fire. How did this fit together? Amanda wondered. Why did Chrissy have a clipping about a homeless man Amanda's father had defended? She searched the tissue paper at the bottom of the shoebox. There were more clippings. But as she reached for one, she heard a car pull into the driveway. She darted to the window and peered down. Dave and Chrissy? Back already? Chrissy was already climbing out of the car. Now what? Now what? Now what? Amanda froze in panic. She clutched the clippings to her chest. The shoe boxes were jumbled in a pile on the floor. Now what? Now what? She had to hide the boxes fast. Her heart pumping, she began pitching them frantically into the closet. When they were all in, she shut the door. She heard the front door slam and someone start up the stairs. Chrissy was coming up to her room. There's no way I can get out of here without running into her, Amanda realized. No way, no way, no way. Clutching the clippings tightly in one hand, Amanda dove under the bed. She bit down on her other hand to stifle the sound of her heavy breathing as Chrissy entered the room. Did I leave this light on? She heard Chrissy murmur to herself. From the movement of her feet, Amanda could tell that Chrissy was examining the room. Amanda stifled a gasp. A clipping had fallen onto the rug. It wasn't far from Chrissy's foot. Chrissy bent down. She picked up the clipping. Then Amanda heard the closet door open and shut. Amanda? Chrissy called, walking out of the room. Amanda listened, trying to tell from Chrissy's footsteps and voice where she was. Amanda, Chrissy called again. She had made her way down the hall to Amanda's room. This is my chance, Amanda decided. She scrambled out from under the bed and sprinted to the bedroom door. I've got to get Mom and Dad. I've got to show them these clippings. I've got to show them that Chrissy isn't here by accident. She was so frightened she couldn't think clearly. Was it okay to leave Kyle and Mary? They're asleep, she told herself, thinking hard, trying to figure out what to do. They're asleep. I'll be back with Mom and Dad in a few minutes. They'll be okay. Taking a deep breath, she plunged out into the hall. Hey, Chrissy called out angrily. What were you doing in there? Hey! But Amanda turned and ran down the stairs. A few seconds later, she was out the front door. Dave, she cried, you're still here. When we got to town, Chrissy changed her mind, Dave said, standing on the front lawn. She didn't want to see the movie, so, Dave, let's go. Hurry, drive me to my parents at the Beachside Inn. Dave hesitated for only a second, then he ran with Amanda to the car. His tires squealed as the car peeled out of the driveway. I have the clippings, Amanda stammered. I have to show them to my parents. She stopped as one of the clippings caught her eye. Suddenly, she grabbed hold of Dave's arm. Dave, listen to this. She read this news story to him. Arthur Lawrence, a homeless person, was acquitted today of arson charges in the Minor and Henry Law Office fire last Tuesday. Mr. Lawrence's attorney, public defender Robert Conklin, has asked that Anton Minor of Peachton be charged with crime. You've lost me, Dave confessed, his eyes straight ahead as the car bounced over the narrow, curving road. Don't you see? Amanda cried, finally putting some of the pieces together. This guy, Anton Minor. He must be related to Chrissy. Maybe he's her father. Yes, he must be her father, because the other clipping said he was Lilith's father. So he's Chrissy's and Lilith's father? Dave asked. Right. And my dad had him charged with setting fire to his own office. Dave nodded. I follow you so far. Chrissy has a grudge against your dad because he pressed charges against her father, but that doesn't explain how she can do all those weird things. I made a struggle to read the clippings in the dim light. You're right, I have no idea how Chrissy's strange powers fit into this. But wait, Dave continued, didn't you tell me Anton Minor accidentally killed himself and his wife, and that Lilith was in a coma? I still don't see what that has to do with Chrissy. Whoa, I don't believe it, Amanda cried. Huh? What? Dave demanded. Amanda turned to see to him an expression of shock on her face. Chrissy is Lilith Minor, she said.